He told police his wife was already dead by 9:15 in the morning. He said a masked intruder had broken in, tied him to a chair, and shot her as she came through the garage door. He said the whole thing was over in minutes. There was just one problem. Connie Dabate was still walking around her house at 10:05. Her Fitbit said so. It tracked every step she took, every movement, every moment. And while Richard Dabate sat across from detectives telling them about a masked intruder in a camouflage suit, a small device clipped to his dead wife's waistband had already recorded exactly what happened inside that house. Minute by minute, step by step. 1,217 feet of evidence. He never knew the watch was watching back. Connie and Richard Dabate had been married since July 4th, 2003. They lived in Ellington, Connecticut, a quiet town, the kind of place where people knew their neighbors and left doors unlocked. Connie worked as a pharmaceutical sales representative. She was 39 years old. By all accounts, she was energetic, organized, devoted to their two young sons. She was the kind of person who woke up early, went to the gym, tracked her steps. She wore her Fitbit One clipped to the waistband of her pants every day. The device recorded steps taken, flights of stairs climbed, distance traveled, and general movement throughout the day. Richard worked as a computer network administrator. He understood systems, logins, data logs, technology. He would later claim he had no idea what was on his wife's device. From the outside, the Dabates looked like a normal Connecticut family. 2 days before Christmas 2015, Connie left home early for a fitness class at the local YMCA. She kissed her sons goodbye, put her Fitbit on, drove down the road. She did not know she was already running out of time. On the morning of December 23, 2015, police received a call from Richard Dabate. He was injured, his wife was dead. He told investigators what happened. He said he had put their two boys on the school bus that morning and waved them off. Connie had left for the YMCA. He followed shortly after, driving toward work. But he said he turned back. He had forgotten his laptop. When he returned home, he heard a noise upstairs. He went to investigate. That is when he said he encountered the intruder. A large man, he said, 6'2", stocky build, wearing a camouflage suit and a mask. Richard said the man overpowered him, tied him to a support pole in the basement with zip ties, and burned him with a blowtorch. He said Connie came home through the garage during the struggle. The intruder, he said, shot her twice, once in the stomach, once in the back of the head. Then, he said, the intruder fled. Richard told detectives all of this from a hospital bed with real injuries, rope burns, burn marks on his torso. There was no forced entry. Nothing in the house had been taken. But investigators did not dismiss the story immediately. They began pulling every thread. What those threads connected to would take the case apart entirely. Investigators obtained search warrants for 4 things: Connie's Fitbit, both of their cell phones, the house computers, and the home alarm system logs. Then they began lining up the timestamps. Here is what the data showed. At 8:46 in the morning, Connie's Fitbit recorded movement consistent with her leaving for the YMCA. At 9:08, activity consistent with leaving the gym. At 9:23, the garage door opened. Connie arrived home. At exactly the same second, her Fitbit recorded her beginning to move inside the house. Between 9:23 and 10:05 in the morning, Connie's Fitbit recorded 1,217 feet of movement. She was not running directly to the basement and getting shot. She was walking around her house for 42 minutes. Richard had told police she was dead by 9:15. The device on her body said otherwise, down to the minute. But that was only the beginning. The alarm system told its own story. At 8:50 in the morning, while Richard claimed he was driving to work, someone logged into the home alarm system remotely from a phone. That phone was Richard's. At 8:50 that morning, the system was disarmed. Then, less than a minute later, it was armed again, all from his device, all while he was supposedly already on his way to the office. At 8:59, the alarm was disarmed again, this time using a physical key fob. The first door to open after that disarm was not a front door, not a back door. It was the basement door. Whoever used that key fob to come inside was already in the house. Richard had told police he came home to get his forgotten laptop. You walk through the front door when you come home to retrieve something. You do not go directly to the basement. And there was one more data point. At 9:01 in the morning, while Richard claimed he was being overpowered by a masked intruder, his phone logged into his work email from the home internet connection. At 9:04, from the same connection, he sent his supervisor an email saying an alarm had gone off at the house and he needed to go check on it. He was emailing his boss from inside the house at the exact time he claimed he was being restrained by a stranger. The story he had told police was not just wrong. It was impossible. Investigators began looking deeper into the Dabate marriage. What they found revealed a man whose life was quietly unraveling in the months before that December morning. Richard had been having an affair with a woman named Sarah Ganza, a longtime friend from high school. By May of 2015, Sarah was pregnant with Richard's child. Richard was now managing two households in his mind, a wife who, according to a note later found in her own phone, had already written down reasons she wanted a divorce, a girlfriend expecting his baby, a secret he had been maintaining for years. Then there was the life insurance policy. Connie Dabate's life was insured for $475,000. 5 days after her death, while investigators were still actively working the case, Richard filed a claim on that policy. And Connie herself had left a digital record of her own doubts. In the notes section of her phone, saved in 2014, was an entry simply titled, "Why I Want a Divorce." She listed reasons: his behavior with money, his failure as a parent, his dishonesty. The text exchanged the day before she died showed her confronting him over a cable bill, accusing him of lying. The picture that emerged was not of a random home invasion. It was of a man who had constructed a way out. And he had built it carefully, right up until the device on his wife's wrist dismantled it piece by piece. Connie Dabate's two sons lost their mother 2 days before Christmas. They were young enough that the holiday season would be tangled with that loss for the rest of their lives. Their father was arrested on April 14, 2017, nearly a year and a half after the murder, charged with killing her. The boys went to live with Connie's older sister. The trial was delayed repeatedly, first by the pandemic, then by the death of Richard's original attorney. Jury selection had to start over entirely because so much time had passed. It finally began in April of 2022. The courtroom heard from 130 witnesses. Prosecutors entered 600 exhibits into evidence. Connie's family sat through every day of it. They heard the technical data, the Fitbit timestamps, the alarm logs, the email sent at 9:01 while his wife was still alive somewhere in that house. They heard about Sarah Ganza, the affair, the pregnancy. They heard Richard, under cross-examination, struggle to explain a timeline that did not and could not add up. Connie's sister later said, at sentencing, that getting a verdict gave them a measure of closure, even though nothing would ever bring her back. On May 10, 2022, the jury found Richard Dabate guilty. Murder, tampering with evidence, making false statements to police. He was sentenced to 65 years in prison. In March of 2025, the Connecticut Supreme Court upheld the conviction unanimously, 6-0. Connie's Fitbit data, the court confirmed, was properly used, properly relied upon, decisive. The Dabate case became a landmark, not because it was the first time a phone was used in court, not because it was the first time a home alarm log was entered as evidence, but because it was the first time a device worn on a victim's body at the moment of her death became the primary witness to her murder. Connie was not there to testify. Her Fitbit was. Every morning, millions of people clip on a tracker, slip on a watch, open a phone, or connect to a home system without thinking twice. These devices record quietly, constantly, without judgment. They do not lie. They do not forget. They do not remember things differently depending on who is asking. The Dabate case drew a line in the criminal justice system that had not existed before. Digital wearable data is now admissible, it is now credible, it is now decisive. For investigators, this case changed how they look at the first hours after a crime. It is no longer only about what the suspect says happened. It is about what every connected device in the vicinity recorded. The phone log, the alarm history, the fitness tracker, the smart doorbell, the car's GPS. Modern life generates a continuous record. Richard Dabate understood technology. He worked in network administration. He knew how data moved. And he still did not think to check what his wife was wearing. On the morning of December 23, 2015, Connie Dabate did what she did most mornings. She put on her Fitbit, drove to the gym, came home through the garage. She walked around her house for 42 minutes. She walked 1,217 feet. And those steps, recorded silently by a small device clipped to her waistband, outlasted every story her killer told. They outlasted his denial, his appeal, his retrial attempts. They were still standing when 6 Connecticut Supreme Court justices reviewed them in 2025 and ruled unanimously that the data held. Connie could not speak for herself, but the device that tracked her life that morning spoke clearly enough. Truth, it turns out, was worn on her waist the whole time. Has a piece of technology ever caught someone in a lie that changed everything? Tell me in the comments.